Hi everyone, we're going to continue today going through the letter of Colossians. And if you remember last video, we kind of talk about the first part of Paul's introduction, where is his thanksgiving, right? Where is he's thanking God because of the testimony of the Colossians. And today we're going to pass to the next section, which is basically the Paul's prayer for the Colossians. Now, if you remember, the Colossians he was very thankful to God. Paul was very thankful to God because the Colossians testimony, and it was a testimony of love, faith, and hope. And that's why Paul was very thankful about their life. And now we see that Paul is asking God for something specifically in the life of the Colossians. And Paul says in Colossians 1, verses 9, he says this: "From the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you." Again, if you remember, Paul has never been there. So that's why he said this: since the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you. And this is very important because, of course, we have Paul praying for someone who he didn't know, but he was very aware of the testimony more because of Epaphras. If you guys remember that name, and if you read verses before, you will see his name, who was the one telling Paul about the life of the Colossians. But because of the testimony he heard from Epaphras about the Colossians, that's why we can see here that he's praying for him. He's praying for the Colossians, and specifically for some things that we're going to see, and it's actually just in this verse, some of the things that we're going to see that Paul is praying for them. And it's not just a prayer that he does like in a Sunday morning and that's it. No, it is a prayer that he's doing constantly. We see it here and more in his wording, right? But it's a constant prayer that Paul does for the Colossians. So Paul, we can see in his prayer, Paul is asking, or he's praying God for the Colossians so that they may be filled with the knowledge of his will. So this is the first phrase, right? In this verse, they might be filled with the knowledge of his will. But then we see two other things: in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. And now this idea of really having knowledge of God's will or understanding of his will is presented in other letters. Paul, for instance, in Ephesians, Paul is telling this: "Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." So after reading these two verses, one of the questions that I was asking to myself: when was the last time I asked God or pray God to really understand his will in my life? So what about you? When was the last time you pray God or ask God to really have an understanding of his will? Is that something that you only ask in maybe certain occasions, specific occasions? I've done that before, right? When there's some specific occasion in my life where I have options, right? And I need to ask, I need to choose between these two options or three options in my life, maybe something big in my life. That's when I pray, right? For God's understanding of his will. But if you see here in this prayer that Paul is doing for the Colossians, it is not only for one specific occasion. It is a constant prayer that he's doing on behalf of the Colossians, for the Colossians' life, so that they might be filled with the knowledge of God's will, with his spiritual wisdom and understanding. And if you remember the introduction that I did about Colossians, there was Gnosticism going around in the Colossians culture or context. So that's why Paul is praying for them constantly, so that they have this wisdom and knowledge about God's will and understanding, as he also mentions. These three different words, right? His will, wisdom, and understanding. Now, if you think about it, right now in our culture, in this country, and social media, there are many principles, many teachings that are against the biblical teaching or what the Bible teaches. And not only that, but the world, it is offering us to put our trust, or is telling us to put our trust in material things, to put our trust in things from this world and not from the eternal. So this is a constant thing that we're going through in school, in our work, and TV, and on social media, everywhere. These ideas or these principles against the biblical teaching. That is why it's so important for us, and that's my encouragement for you today, that you might be praying, or that you pray for you personally, and also pray for others, because that's what the Apostle Paul is doing. He's praying for others. But pray for you, for your life, and for others, so that you might be filled with the knowledge of God's will. And not just that, but really ask and pray to God so that He can give us the understanding of His will, and He gives us the wisdom to make choices, the wisdom to live a life that is according to His word. Paul did not cease, right? He did not quit praying for them, praying for the Colossians. So that's the same thing that we have to do. We don't have to quit praying. We don't have to quit asking God for these three things that we see in the verse 9 in Colossians. So if you can, I would love if you could pray for me so that I can have that in my life, so that I can have that wisdom, that understanding of God's will in my life. And I also will be praying for you, for my family here in Grace Bible Church. And I hope that together we can be a church like the church in Colossae, and like the Colossians, and have this testimony of faith, love, and hope.